Okay, welcome everyone. Requesting you to be on mute when you're not speaking, and we will be recording the session. So just be aware of that. And with this, I think I will just pass it on to Gayatri to start off the proceedings.
Welcome to a very special evening. We've all gathered today, virtually of course, from different corners of the world to launch a new digital platform, Galaxy. Galaxy, as the name suggests, is a platform for women, by from all parts of the world. It's a squad of sisters where you can ask the questions you were hesitant to ask or didn't know whom to ask. The question could be about anything: career, mentoring, education, health, beauty, anything that concerns us women. Answering those queries will be women who've had similar experiences, who are sorry, who are emphatic, supportive, and most importantly, non-judgmental. There's also a distinguished panel of experts you can rely upon to get answers from. Galaxy is a safe space for women to have a voice and thrive. Because as Melinda Gates has rightly said, a woman with a voice is a strong woman, and strong women can accomplish just about anything. Let me now introduce you to the team behind Galaxy. Like the nucleus in a cell, the nucleus of the Galaxy team is small and tightly bound. It comprises of 4 members: founder Sonali Sinha, co-founder Karishma Pai or Kim, chief cheerleader Sonali Panda, and yours truly. Yes, I'm Gayatri Srivastav. I'm co-founder of Galaxy 2. It might surprise you all to know that Sonali Sinha is based out of Singapore, Kim is in Johannesburg, South Africa, Panda is in Bangalore, and I'm based out of Mumbai. Team Galaxy has not had an in-person meeting ever. But while we would like to remedy that situation, we've not really let that stop us. Because what we are trying to present here is a technology-based solution for gender equality on a global scale. Let's hear more about Galaxy from the founder, Sonali Sinha. Sonali is an executive coach, leadership facilitator, social entrepreneur, and an ex-investment banker. Sonali combines a passion for psychology with her experience and multiple coaching credentials to bring transformational change in her clients. Her approach promotes congruence and helps leaders become more strategic in their decision making. Sonali believes in giving back to society in terms of time, talent, and treasure. Sonali, many congratulations on the birth of your new baby.
Thank you, Gayatri.
I know this is a really emotional moment for you, but how did this idea of Galaxy come about? What motivated you to launch such a platform for women?
So this idea has been with me for a few years now. But when I started my career in the mid-90s, I was one of the first few women in my family to actually work in the corporate sector. So after my MBA from XLRI, when I landed a job, it was in investment banking. And nobody in my family had worked in investment banking. In fact, I didn't have any friends who had worked in this space. So there was no one that I could really turn to for, objective or non-judgmental or advice without expectations. As I worked in the industry, I found that there were very few women in investment banking. But as I got more and more senior, I realized that I would be the only woman in the room, and I had to figure out how to navigate this, male-dominated industry totally on my own. Later, when I got into the personal development space, I started doing workshops for women on leadership, on personal branding, on second careers. And I realized that everyone is actually grappling with similar, challenges in terms of how do I prioritize, How do I figure out what my options are? How do I position myself for, the kind of work that I want? How do I get credit for the work that I want? And I felt that, this is something that we have all gone through or are going through. So why do we reinvent the wheel each time? Why can't we just put our, collective wisdom together? And that's where the idea of Galaxy came from. Coaching is one-to-one, training is one-to-many, but there is a limit to how many people you can reach. But when we have a platform like Galaxy, it is many-to-many. All the experience that we have as women out there is available to all the other women, so we can support each other. So that was the thought behind Galaxy. And why I thought of a tech-backed solution is, we tend to put our needs the last as women. So I wanted to make it easy and available to us 24/7, 365 days a year. Whenever you feel the need for it, Galaxy is there for you. You can come, ask questions, share your experiences. So that was the thought behind Galaxy.
Yeah. You said many to many. So Galaxy initially is designed essentially as a Q&A platform, a question and answer platform. Why this emphasis on a Q&A platform?
Okay, so questions are a very powerful tool to build connections and, to extract the innate wisdom that people have, right? When we ask a question, we open the space for somebody else to fill it in. Yeah, and as a coach, I hold that space for my clients where they can explore their thoughts without any fear of judgment. And my evocative questions help them get insights to move forward in life. So I know the power of questions, and that's why, we all believe that being a Q&A platform will enable more meaningful conversations. It's not just another social media platform to showcase your talents. It's more about having those conversations, asking those questions and sharing your experiences. So that's the thought behind the Q&A.
Yeah. Thank you, Sonali. There's a question from a newly registered member on our platform. She's written it to say, I've joined the platform. It looks lovely, but I have no questions to ask. What do I do there?
That's an interesting question. So first of all, when you join, please go and populate your profile, put a photograph and write a brief description, because it helps other women on the platform know who they are engaging with and to build connections or seek help or seek mentorship, right? So that's the first step, just populate your profile, but go ahead and ask a question. I know we all struggle with asking questions, but asking questions is a skill which is very useful in all walks of life, including leadership, including customer communication. So I would encourage you to ask questions. If you don't feel like asking a question, you can go ahead and answer some of those questions. Even if it has been answered before, feel free to add your perspective, because that's what we're looking for. Every question can have multiple answers and multiple perspectives. So definitely go ahead and answer some questions. You can also explore the blog section. Our members are contributing some lovely blogs. We are very thrilled that, blogs like there is something on breaking up with myself or being authentic with myself. These blogs have got 150 plus views, and we are very excited because this is genuine sharing on the platform. There is a member, Shalini Srivastav. She shared a dance video. She's decided to dance her way to 50. She said, every day I'm going to dance and I'm going to record and share. So, so it's so heartwarming to see everyone opening up and sharing. So use the blogs. And we also have something called channels. That's where you can go and see Gupshup with Gayatri. As many of you know, she has this wonderful talk show. So all those videos are available there. And you can also start your own channel. If you are into, any area where you want to showcase your talents, you can set up a channel and have followers from the platform. So there are many things that you can do, and we'd love for you to come and engage on the platform. Thank you, Gayatri. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. I think our viewers have got an idea. I'm sure many of them are already registered members there. They started using it, but Coming from you, I'm sure it's cleared many of their queries. The next question is for our co-founder, Kim. Karishma Pais, or as she says, she's only known as Kim. Kim is from the 1999 batch of XLR Jamshedpur. She's lived in 16 cities across 6 countries and has done things as diverse as editing a fashion magazine in Cairo to teaching organizational behavior at NMIMS in Mumbai. Her current professional work revolves around relocation and cross-cultural management. Kim, can we have you on the spotlight, please?
Yeah.
Hi.
Kim, what does Galaxy mean to you and how did you come to be part of it?
So Sonali spoke to me a couple of months ago and she said that she was creating this platform called Galaxy. And coming to my personal background, I come from a family where I was never told, no, you can't do that because you are a girl. And it was only after I came out of Mangalore, when I came to Jamshedpur, that I realized that this upbringing that I had, where my grandparents, my grandfather, my father, they all supported everything that we did. I have 2 brothers and a sister. And we did not really see a difference in how the brothers were treated or how the girls were treated. That difference was never there. And when I came out of Mangalore is when I realized that this is not really what happens. It's not the norm in most of the country. And that women have always, they're treated differently in a house. Let's not say a backseat. They're just treated differently. The rules for a boy is very different from the rules for a girl in the house. And while this happens in the house, what happens when you come into the workspace is that this carries forward. Women feel scared to express their opinions because they haven't seen their mothers being very strong, or they haven't seen their grandmothers being very strong in expressing their opinions. So there is this background that women come with that kind of puts them a bit on the back foot when they come to a corporate workplace or any other kind of a workplace. And that's why a forum like Galaxy, where women can talk to other women, where there are other women to cheer them on, because sometimes a woman just needs someone to say that I believe in you, I trust you, go ahead, go for it, go for that promotion, you do deserve a raise, and you just need someone behind you to tell you this. And I think that Galaxy has been conceptualized beautifully. Hopefully we can keep it very positive, which is the way that we have conceptualized it, and that's why I was definitely keen to get on board. All my counseling experience, my HR experience, my work with colleges has shown me that women would love to have a platform like this where they have more women cheering them on.
Absolutely. Okay. If the next question is also for you, are men allowed on Galaxy? Why? Why not?
This is pretty much the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
We have had, you just look at our participants out here on the launch party. There are so many men out there. I happen to know, I think a lot of us know these guys because they've been classmates, they're my husband's classmates, and they're all extremely supportive men. They have, when you talk to them about a new venture, they're very supportive. Why do we not want them on Galaxy? Okay, so first let me just say, the Galaxy as a forum is only for women, but Galaxy, our social media profiles, our Instagram, our Facebook, our LinkedIn, that's open to anyone. And this is where we are celebrating women as of now, but we will evolve that into a lot more content. And guys, we do have a space for you. We're not kicking you out. We're not anti-men, I promise. Yeah. Women do have a problem bringing up some questions, even if it is to the own women in their own family. There are some things you might not feel comfortable asking your mom. You might not be able to give you that answer. Ever asking your dad such a question. And women just feel more comfortable asking another woman. If we look at us today, we have developed, we are more independent, we have supportive families, the men in our lives are extremely supportive to us, but we are not the norm. There is a whole country out there where women really cannot ask these questions to even the women in their own lives, because it's seen as being, why are you even asking this question? Why are you asking, can I wear a short skirt to work? Now, I don't want a man giving me an answer to that. I want a woman telling me whether it's okay to wear a short skirt or not wear a short skirt. When you look at a mom's group, men don't say, why am I not allowed in that mom's group? Because there are things being discussed there that you don't want to know about. You don't want to know how bad the pain is. You don't want to know how soon a woman's periods are going to start again. So you don't want to be on that group. this is just one part of what women go through. What women go through in a corporate workspace, what women go through in a college. So women do want a space where they can only talk to other women because it at least makes them feel safe. And that is the safe space that we're trying to create on Galaxy, where women feel confident enough, safe enough to ask these questions they haven't been able to ask anyone else. And that is the only reason we don't want men on the platform. I promise there's no male bashing happening as of now.
Yeah, so we thank all the men who are here today, but we hope you can see us on social media. But for the Q&A platform, we are trying to keep it as a safe space, and therefore men are not allowed as of now. Yeah. Thank you, Kim. The next question is for our chief cheerleader, Sonali Panda. Sonali is also from XLRI from the 1996 batch. She was a serious banker for 20 years, she says. Serious banker. Her last role was as chief marketing officer at ING Vysya Bank. Now she's in pursuit of the simple pleasures of life and is involved with projects close to her heart. From trees to animals to children with special needs and now Galaxy. Sonali Panda.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we've seen Galaxy have an aggressive social media campaign in the last couple of days and those emails about the party and Bombay lottery. What was the thought process there?
So I think one of the key things is to have fun, and Galaxy is also about mentoring, and it's about, helping create a network, but it's also about celebrating women. And we did launch something called Women Pushing Boundaries. And the idea was that we celebrate the women in our lives. Often we're always looking for inspiration with someone famous or someone on TV or that book. And you never really realize, or you never give it enough thought that the person next to you has probably been pushing boundaries in a like a very small way, but has, therefore been changing culture, and culture changes in bits. And those women are as important as the ones who are climbing Mount Everest. And it's been an amazing journey because we've reached out to people we know, and gradually the word is spreading. And actually we're now getting people reaching out to us, people who we don't know, saying that I want to celebrate my mother, I want to celebrate my partner. So it's just spreading the joy that there are heroes or sheroes in our midst everywhere. And we just hope to keep on, we encourage everybody here today to kind of come and share their stories, and we'd love to kind of share that with the world.
Thank you, Sonali. Which brings us to the theme of today's launch, Women Pushing Boundaries. All our three speakers today are exceptional and multidimensional women who tell in fields they've chosen. They are strong women with a voice of their own. They've pushed many boundaries, broken many barriers, taken the road to travel. Sorry. Yeah. Coming back to Women Pushing Boundaries. Our three speakers, as I said, are multidimensional, exceptional women who've broken many barriers, traveled the road less traveled, and had journeys which all of us could learn from. Our first speaker for the day is Preeti Reddy. Preeti is one of corporate India's most senior and respected figures. She's recently been elevated to the position of Chairwoman, South Asia, Insights Division, Kantar. She's also the chairperson of the CII, Indian Women's Network, Maharashtra. She's a regular feature in Impact's list of 50 most influential women in media, marketing, and advertising for the past 5 years. Preeti, thank you for being here. And now I request Sonali Sinha to have a conversation with Preeti Reddy on the theme of Women Pushing Boundaries.
I think Preeti might have dropped out.
Oh, is that so? Should we? Yeah. Should we, Sonali, then should we go on to Aparna?
We'll start with Aparna. We'll come back to Preeti. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Aparna. Is she there?
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. We'll come back later to Preeti. We'll begin this session with a very gentle and glamorous, romantic and research-driven Aparna Gupta. Aparna is a beauty and wellness columnist. She's a consulting beauty editor and regularly contributes to magazines like Vogue, Verve, Lifestyle Asia, and Gracia. She's the founder of lavenderroom.com. She consults brands on content strategy and product development. With a sizable following on Instagram, Aparna's journey is truly about following one's passion and turning it into a lucrative career. Welcome, Aparna.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gayatri.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much for the kind words. I'm going to use all these words for my profile now.
Yeah. Okay. So, Aparna, you're a beauty columnist. What does beauty mean to you?
See,
It's about having perfect hair and makeup all the time. Is it about being size 0?
no, Gayatri, I think beauty is something which just appeals to your heart. It is something which appeals to your gut. Now, it is different for each person. While we are in our, let's say, while someone is in their teens, they have a more people-pleasing nature, right? They want to be accepted. So therefore, you would have more teens, or you will have, them kind of trying to follow a certain role model. And as you grow, as you change, your idea of beauty changes. So I think beauty is what gives joy to you, what makes you feel good, not just about yourself, but about just being there in the moment. So, it's like you see roses, you may want to just stop and smell them, whereas someone else might see some wildflowers and they might just click a picture. It is about what appeals to your senses. And beauty is sensorial. It's taking in all your senses, all your 5 senses.
Such an interesting concept. So how did you venture into this field, about 20 years ago? There was not much happening in this field.
So I didn't start with beauty specifically 20 years ago. It started with, I was on the sports. It started as an intern in the international desk of Asian-Aid. I didn't like it at all. I was thinking journalism is not for me. Then I was absorbed in the features department of Asian-Aid by some stroke of luck. And then I moved into the lifestyle space. And it just so happened, it was a very, how the shift into beauty happened was, I was working in Bombay Times, and they were, I was working in Bombay Times, they didn't have weekly offs, right? I wanted a weekly off because my husband that time used to sail, and the little time he used to be there. If I was not there on a weekend, it used to be, oh my God, I was working on a Sunday and having a Monday off when nobody was there. So I just told the HR that, listen, I want to, quit. And they came up with this thing that, we are launching something in the beauty space. It's a magazine which will be completely on beauty. And though I had worked on lifestyle, I had done pastry, I had done product descriptions, everything, but beauty as a space around 13 years ago was absolute. I mean, it was just around 3 pages or 4 pages in magazines. There were not even too many glossy magazines at that time. Vogue had not even launched.
Yeah.
But I said, okay. I said, fine. I thought that after 5 months or 5 issues, only writing on beauty, I would exhaust myself. But I still started. I think it was the whole charm of having the weekend off in a space. I still wanted to write. I wanted to be creative. And yes, and plus as a topic, it was something which interested me. Also, while I was in the lifestyle segment, while I was in Bombay Times, I was writing a bit on everything. I wanted to have my own beat, expertise. So yes, and I started by reading a lot of books. So before I joined the job, there must be at least 20 books on beauty, which I must have read. And even after that, I kept on researching all the time. Yes, so it happened quite by chance.
That's why I've called you research driven.
Yes, very research driven.
Yeah. So, I mean, it must, even journalism for you was an unconventional choice because you come from a family of bureaucrats. And there must have been pressure for
Absolutely.
you to have joined the civil services or the corporate sector.
Absolutely. I think it was for my dad, it was, I think everyone in my family expected me to join the civil services. I was a reasonably decent, grade picker also. So it was like, okay, she can easily crack it kind of a thing. And the fact that I did not join, and that too, forget everything I mean, MBA was the second most acceptable thing that you could, do. I mean, what is media? Like they didn't understand any of it.
Yeah.
And that too, as interns, you work late hours, even not as interns, generally, you have very erratic time schedule. They could not
Little pay. Little pay.
There was a time when my, because my father, I mean, I started working when we say it's 20 years, because I started working while I was studying for postgrad also. So after a point, I mean, for 2 months, my dad was he was okay. He took it with a pinch of salt. And after that, he was like, what are you doing? You're not even getting anything. Why don't you just take the money from me and, sit at home, like prepare for your IS. And one of his friends also told me that, the peon in our office gets more than what you're getting. So it was not done with any intention. Now that at that time, I was, of course, extremely hurt. I was rebellious and all that. But I don't think it was done with an intention to stop or hinder. It was just like a reality check. They did not know this world. I didn't know this world at that time. I didn't know that there was something which I would like. There are different beats of journalism. There are different expertise that you can write upon. So yes.
Yeah.
It was very different.
Yeah. So your life decisions, men have had such an important role in the kind of decisions you've made. Did you ever feel
not directly, but indirectly?
Yeah. Did you ever feel that, if you had a mentor, did you have a mentor along your journey? Did you ever feel the need for a mentor?
No, I did. I think it's always nice if you have a mentor, Gayatri, because like how Sonali was saying, if you have someone who can give you advice without expectation, have that non-judgmental thing, then it's, where it's, if you have someone like an aunt or someone like a sister, cousin, friend who's in the same field, who has seen, then it is, I think, then it always makes you feel more comfortable, as opposed to you're literally, discovering a new path like Alice in Wonderland almost. So I feel mentoring is very important. And I feel this is a great platform where people from different walks of life have access to women in different walks of life. So, there is always something that you can draw from.
That's why we have a panel of experts. So, women from different fields seeking answers on different.
Yes, I mean, if I was at that time and if someone would have told me that, listen, you don't have to get worried that you're not liking the sports desk. It's not the end of, it's not the only thing in journalism. Like if you can't, let's say, if you don't like proofreading, that doesn't mean that you cannot become a writer or you can't have your bylines. You don't have to be a copy editor to, there are various different roles in it. So whereas so I think it's very nice for someone who's there to be giving that kind of advice. It just makes that struggle or the discovery period shorter. And since we are in Insta age, we want that, the time that we are lost in the woods to be much shorter.
Yeah. So what would your advice be to young fashion bloggers? You have a sizable following on Instagram and every day we see new fashion influencers coming. Someone who has
beauty bloggers, right?
Fashion beauty blogger. What advice would you like to give young girls listening to you right now? That space.
I think young girls, I mean, most of them are so brilliant themselves. But one advice that I would give is, if you're talking about blogging, one is to ask a few questions to yourself before you, understand what is your brand identity. Just ask a few questions. There's so many bloggers out there. What can I do which would be different. I mean, of course, I feel I have a great sense of style, which I want to share. That's a reason enough. But what's different about my style? I need to pick up on the USP that I bring to the table so that I can rise from the crowd. Because when you are doing something like fashion blogging, or when you have something like blogging, the whole intention is not something that you're doing just for your friends and family, right? You want to reach a larger audience. You're like a performer. So you have to figure out what's your USP. Then you have to be consistent. You can't, it's creativity is not as whimsical as it is made to be. Especially if you're in professional writing, it is not that, okay, I'll write one article and after 2 months, if I feel like, if I'm in a mood, I'll write the second one. No, you have to be consistent. So I would say that is the other thing that you have to.
Absolutely.
So I think, and I would say is that be genuinely engaged with your followers. I think that's very important. When you are into blogging, it's not about, oh, I got this dress and I want to showcase it, or how will I get that? It is about how do I, people who are following me, how do I bring joy to their lives, or how do I make it easier for them to make certain decisions? If nothing else, I should be providing them entertainment.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Aparna. Thank you for your thoughts. Yes. Creativity also has to be consistent. That's the advice to young bloggers. So
yes.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next speaker.
Thank you,
Aparna, we request you to stay on, and there'll be other Q&A session at the end of the week.
I'm here.
Yeah. So please send us your questions in the chat box. And from Aparna, we'll move on to Preeti. Preeti is back.
Hi, Gayatri. Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Preeti. Yes. Yeah. I'll give your introduction once again. Thank you so much for being here, Preeti. We know you're very busy. We know you're one of corporate India's most respected and senior leaders. You are the chairwoman, South Asia Insights Division, Kantar. You're also the chairperson of the CII, Indian Women's Network, Maharashtra. You've been a regular feature in Impact's list of 50 most influential women in media, marketing, advertising for the past 5 years. And now I'll request Sonali Sinha to put some questions to Preeti on the topic of women pushing boundaries.
Thank you, Gayatri. Thank you, Preeti, for being here. Really appreciate, the time you've taken out to be with us. So you started your career in the 80s.
And it's something about my age.
You've reached the very top as chairwoman. So tell us about your journey from campus, which I know is LSR and XLRI, same as me. Yes. So from XLRI to chairwoman, what has the journey been like?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for having me on this platform. And as you trace my journey and as you ask me questions, you will, I think, appreciate why the platform is an idea whose time has come. And I'm really grateful to be associated with it. On my journey itself, it's been a fairly long and I think an arduous journey as well. An interesting but arduous one. It was a combination of luck and serendipity and hard work and making choices at the right time. My first job after campus placement one was with Tata Burrows, which is a company which is, I don't know if it exists any longer. It's become TCS because most of these companies have become TCS after that. So I was called junior software engineer and I used to work in Bombay, which was really the software consulting, but it was really a glorified name for a coder. And I used to write code. That was my first job. The attraction of the job was that after 6 months of training, you were posted in the US and many people, went there and never came back. And so it was effectively a passport to the US. I spent 5 to 6 months with them, did my training, and I found that I actually liked people more than I liked machines. And even the lure of the US was not enough for me to stay in a job that I actually absolutely hated. So I joined a consulting firm in Chennai, Besant Raj Consultants then, and I found that I enjoyed being paid for problem solving and for clients, and I also enjoyed the expert status that consulting gave me. So, when I was at Besant Raj for a couple of years, I saw an advertisement from a research company called Mode that said we need more of us, and then went on to describe what to me seemed like my dream job, because it was about understanding client issues relating to marketing and to consumers, and then designing questions to address those issues, finding the answers, and advising clients on how to solve for the issues. It was a small company, it was a startup at the time, but the job appealed to me and I decided to join them. And the same company then grew to become a company called TNS, and then later Kantar through a series of mergers. So I enjoyed that work, and thereafter, in some way or the other, I have stayed true to that basic premise in the work that I do. That I've worked on the client side, I've worked in other countries, I worked in other organizations, but always in the area of using consumer understanding to drive growth for clients, and in the process drive growth for the organization that I work for. So that has stayed constant. And the important thing is that I've enjoyed what I've done, and I was always more concerned about the impact that I had on clients and their businesses than what I was getting out of it in the process. And in the process, I got a lot out of it. So I grew along with our clients, and therefore the businesses I handled also grew. And that's really how I reached where I am.
Wow. Lovely. So inspirational. You found the kind of work that you loved. And I love the point that you made, that you always focused on impact that you're having for your clients. That's really inspirational. Along the way, did you encounter, we hear the term glass ceiling, or any other barriers? Did you come across that?
Yeah. I appreciate the fact, and I recognize that women do encounter a great deal of bias, both conscious and unconscious bias, in their professional and their personal lives. There are many barriers to overcome to realize their full potential. So we should not take those lightly. And our endeavor as women should always be to help other women. However, in my career, I was lucky that I did not encounter any significant external barriers. The barriers I encountered were actually internal and in my own mind. Am I good enough? Can I do this job? What they call the imposter syndrome, right? That it's I think really strong in women, that I'm not capable. I have been put here through some, freak of nature, and I will be found out soon, So that, I think that was the biggest barrier, and I think it is a barrier for a lot of women. So as a result, I would hold back on taking new assignments or on a role change. I resisted sometimes moving cities or changing the organization that I had worked on for a long time, even though I was stagnating in it. It's only after that internal barrier was removed that I really made progress in my career. So I think I would have got where I am faster if I had recognized that earlier.
So you said you got over your internal barriers. So how did you go about doing that?
It was the realization came when I realized that other people seemed to have more faith in my capabilities than I did. And someone close to me actually sat me down and told me that I need to move out of my comfort zone unless I want to keep doing the same thing at the same level for the rest of my career. And I'm eternally grateful to that person who brought that clarity in my thinking and actually painted a scenario for me that was not very pleasing. So it was a bit of a shock treatment, but after that, I did not allow myself to fall in the trap of holding myself back. I mean, I still have doubts. I think I still suffer from the imposter syndrome, but I now consciously work to move myself out of my comfort zone. Every time I have done that, I have actually gained.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing this, because we know of external barriers, but to recognize those internal barriers and to work with them. So my last question, what is the advice that you have for women who are somewhere in the middle of their career, getting closer to the pointy end of the corporate hierarchy?
It's a little presumptuous and maybe a little dangerous to give someone else advice, because we know each one's journey is different. And today's women are so smart, I mean, there's, different opportunities that we didn't have at all now. So I'm always a bit wary when some people ask me things like, who was my role model? Or they say that I am their role model. Because I'm saying you can be a role model to demonstrate that something is possible, but let's recognize that one's journey can't be cloned or replicated in any way, and every career follows its own trajectory. But that said, there are some things that I think helped me along the way that I can share that might help others. And some of that we've actually spoken about even, when in the launch earlier. One is, of course, that make sure you enjoy what you do. I mean, there's no getting away from that. If you're going to go spend a lot of, some 8 to 12 hours a day, make sure you enjoy it. You might not find that what you enjoy in the first pass, but experiment. And in the final analysis, it will actually save you more time. It will save you time, and it will save you, a lot of heartburn, if nothing else. Secondly, find yourself a mentor. I can't emphasize how important that is. I mean, if you don't already have one, find one quickly. This could be somebody in your organization or someone outside. Actually, ideally, you should have both. Because one, to look out for opportunities and, within the organization, and one to do so outside. And that's actually the most sure-shot way of leveraging opportunities or just having a sounding board when you have to make career decisions. The third is, and again, this brings me to Galaxy, actively work at networking. Women tend to be reluctant to do so, whereas men are very good at it, and women seem to feel that being good at my work is enough. Why do I need to network, do any kind of networking? They look down on networking, really. But that's a bit of a fallacy, because obviously you have to be good at what you do. That's hygiene. But beyond that, a network can help you find the next opportunity, just give you advice, just give you support. Men have a men's club. Women need to build a sisterhood to lean upon, which is why, again, I'm saying Galaxy is such a welcome platform. Have faith in yourself, lean in, make people understand that you want the top job. That moving ahead matters to you. Make sure you do that. It's not that it's something that will come to you accidentally or by default, okay? And that you will do that job better than anybody else. Last 2 points. One is build diversity of experience. It doesn't mean that you need to job hop. Diversity can come from within the organization as well. And today, lateral growth is not the only way to grow, right? There is what we call zigzag careers. You get, to get diversity is a route today. Companies are increasingly encouraging their top talent to do that. So actively look for that also. And finally, hone your people skills and hone your communication skills. Because as you move towards the top, those are the 2 skills you will need. You will find that 80% of your time you will have to deal with people issues, and also that your role as a leader will be to, to build a vision and then to align the rest of the organization to that vision, because you have to get people to work for you in line with the vision that you've put forth for them. So I can't emphasize how important it is to. Not everybody is not a great communicator. You can get help in that, but it's a very important skill that you have. So really, that's my advice, and I hope you find it useful.
Thank you so much. I think, all the points that you said, are so relevant, and really thank you so much for sharing your journey and, giving us an insight into what helped you and what can help all of us. Thank you. Yeah. Over to you, Gayatri.
You'll introduce Radhika.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are very excited to have Radhika Vaz here with us. Radhika is an Indian stand-up comedian, improviser, and writer. Her hour-long comedy special, Unladylike, The Pitfalls of Propriety, and Older, Angrier, Hairier, prompted Harper's Bazaar to call her the funniest person you will ever meet. Her book, Unladylike, a memoir, is available on Amazon, and her long-running column in the Times of India, Read It and Weep, explored social and cultural aspects of life in India. Radhika has contributed articles to Vogue, GQ, Architectural Digest, The Washington Post, and many other publications. In 2015, she was the recipient of a Gotham Award for Breakthrough Series Short Form for the web series Shugs and Facts. So we are very excited to have Radhika here with us, and I will ask Gayatri to start the conversation with her. Thank you, Radhika, for being here.
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Radhika. Such a pleasure
Hi,
to have you on
Gayatri.
Galaxy. Yeah. So, Radhika, how can you tell your viewers how you went from from doing hotel sales and advertising to being one of India's foremost stand-up comedians?
Foremost, maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but nonetheless,
Foremost women.
I actually started doing stand-up because I lived in New York, and I realized that almost everyone that I knew around me had a hobby. That was something that was very interesting, that I didn't feel was the case in the early 2000s in my crowd in India. Like I felt my crowd and myself, our hobby was getting drunk on the weekends and then barely recovering and going to work. But when I went to New York, I just found a lot of people would, find something outside of work that they would dedicate themselves to. And I began to feel a little less than in conversations where people would talk about the stuff that they were into that was not work related. And so one day I was just sitting there thinking that my boyfriend, who's now my husband, I mean, even he had something interesting that he was doing. He was training for a marathon. And first I thought I'd train for the marathon too, like a good girlfriend. And then I realized I hated it. And then I realized that there was something I used to enjoy when I was younger, which was acting. I used to love being in school plays and debates and things like that. And so I was in New York, so I figured I'd go look for an acting class after work kind of thing. And it was it was a total random thing that a woman who did improv comedy, and had to be a woman because I think there was something about clicking with a female comedian, she was doing a class on improvised comedy, and it was a free class, and I took it, and I just really liked her, and I started taking class with her, and then it just sort of burgeoned from there. I got really attached to the class. I started taking more classes. I started teaching improv several years later. And the moment I started teaching improv was when I realized that maybe I can consider making a switch to something like this. Because the one thing that I always say about the performing arts is that you make no money initially, and you may not make money for the rest of your life. And when I say make money, I'm comparing it to a lot of you guys and the jobs that you have. And unfortunately, that's a huge comparison point for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and it should be, because we have to live, and we have to pay bills and things like that, eat, buy clothes. So one of the things that made this become a reality move for me was the fact that I could always teach. And the moment that kind of felt like I can live a life in the creative field without being a star, like how many people are really going to become that? So if I am not going to become Deepika Padukone, how am I going to continue to be in an artistic field? Oh, I can teach, I can write. Then, from there I discovered I could write. And one thing I did do a lot of was, if I ever got an opportunity, I took it. whether I didn't really know, like when Times of India approached me, that was a completely out of the blue thing. They said, will you write like once a month? You live in New York, like just, some fun stuff. You kind of got this feminist kind of view. Like, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. How many words? I didn't even know about this word count thing. They would be like, oh no, this is too long. You have to only do it in like 700 words or whatever. Like, what? So I just took all the work I got, and I didn't get paid very much. I didn't know how to negotiate. Those were things I learned as I went along. But I did surprise myself a little bit because I was a very meek advertising executive. I was very meek as a salesperson. I wasn't the girl who would be like, I want a promotion. I want that job. I wasn't good at that. But the moment I fell into something I liked doing, I was very risk happy all of a sudden. I was like, yeah, I got an offer to write a book from a publishing company. And the moment I got the offer to write the book, I didn't know what I was going to write, but I knew I had to do this. And so I've done a lot of work without necessarily always knowing how to do it.
Wow. So it's a lot of chance pay dance and a lot of hard work and a talent between creativity and commerce. So you mentioned sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I always feel like talent is that one nebulous thing that you can't put your finger. You don't know how much talent really anybody has, but you do know how hard they can work. And the one thing that I really liked about what Preeti said was, Preeti and Aparna both made two super important points that took me a little while to figure out. And then once I did, it helped a lot. Was one is consistency. And some of my jobs have forced that upon me. And the other was networking, which are critical. Okay. These are measurable goals. Talent is not,
Okay. Yeah. So you say women are under a lot of pressure to be young, not to be clever, not to be ambitious, not to be funny, but pretend to be young. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So, my second show was called Older, Angrier, Hairier. I was 40 years old when I finally wrote that. And I do believe that a lot of the reason why sometimes we don't get ahead is because we're subliminally pushed, if not overtly so, towards goals that are not necessarily very healthy for us. And one of them is youth. The cult of youth is huge and it's getting bigger. It's not diminishing. It freaks me out that Kim Kardashian and her sisters all now look like one another. And the mother looks younger than them. And it's not normal, but it's now normal. This is now normal. We have filters on Instagram that I have met some of these girls and I didn't recognize them in real life. I was like, what? That's hi, of course I recognize you from Instagram. No, I don't recognize you from Instagram because you got a crazy ass filter that you look nothing like that. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to look like this, but I'm just saying that there is a lot of pressure and we all feel it, like all of us feel it. Absolutely. We all have done and we've all done unhealthy things. And the worst part is the emphasis on what we should be, which is beautiful and skinny and young and takes away from the emphasis to be ambitious, to get ahead, to ask for a raise, to demand the job that we deserve, to study more, to educate us. That stuff is just not important. And let's be honest, part of the reason all that other stuff's important is because women should get married and have children. Like, that's our goal. I'm very angry. Can anyone get that? Like, you get that I'm a pissed off.
No, you've made many public, you say, are you really a woman if you haven't had a child?
Yes.
You've been raising uncomfortable questions like those. Mm-hmm. And there are also a lot of dislikes you've gotten on your videos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Decided not to have children and you're very comfortable with that and you're advocating that also in many.
Yeah, I am. I'm advocating not having children, you guys. No shade to the women who already produced the children. We need a few to keep this world going. Got that. But I think what's very strange is how a woman who chooses not to have a child, that inquiry becomes so intense. Like, the assumption is, when are you going to have kids? Not are you going, is that something you want to do? It's like, so when are you doing it? When? It's like, maybe never. And I remember when I never thought about having children my whole life. It never occurred to me that that was something I would do. And, a lot of people have asked me, in fact, Gayatri and I had a conversation right before this about feminism. And she was like, so are you a feminist? And I was like, what? No. And I was obviously joking because I'm a feminist. But I wasn't a feminist consciously or even unconsciously for many years. And partly, again, it's because, maybe, again, in my crowd, we were too busy getting drunk on the weekends, like I said, not inquiring. I realized I was a feminist when I became 33, 34, 35, and the question about are you going to have kids started occurring in my life. That was a question my husband never got asked. It's always the woman. And that really made me aware of how different men and women and how different our lives will become because of children. Because we have to carry them, birth them, take care of them for several years, make the sacrifices that a man doesn't have to make. And by the way, there are women who've done it with so much aplomb and style and grace. And that's great for them. But it's not something I wanted to do. And I had to make up excuses. I would go around telling people that I had a problem, like that I can't have kids, so that I would get their sympathy rather than their disgust. I was like, I'll take the sympathy because that's better than this. Don't want children, you're a child hater. So there's a lot of negativity. And the thing that I just want to say to anyone who's younger and or even my age who's not had kids and feels like a lot of pressure, the one thing everyone promised me was that if I don't have children, I will regret it. And I am telling you, I don't regret it. Like, I have a long list of shit that I regret in my life because I've done a lot of stupid things. Not having kids was a wise decision for me personally. Having children is not a biological eventuality for the female species. It is just not. It is not. We do not have a maternal instinct. That is a lie. We have to keep them alive once they come. And it is on us to do it, which is why they're like, you have a maternal instinct, have a child. No, don't believe that. You don't have a maternal instinct. If you want to have a child, if you want to be a parent, go for it. You have our support.
Yeah.
But if you don't, you still got our support.
Absolutely. So one of the most popular questions on Galaxy is, this, what would you say to your 20-year-old self? And that's a question I'm putting forth to you, Radhika. What would you say to your 20-year-old self? What advice?
There are a couple of things. I was actually even just making notes while you guys were talking to the other ladies. And, one of the things that I wish I had done more of was to equip myself with more information on finances. From a very young age, to have taken on that responsibility fully for myself, that I will have to financially be completely geared up to take care of myself, only because that whether you make a little money or a lot of money, it's really important to feel a level of comfort around money and to not think that you don't know how to make more money or how to invest money or how to ask for a raise or how to even ask when you're going into an interview for what is your worth. These are the things that I wish I had paid more attention to, is really get financially savvy. And again, your talent may not, there's some people who just get that kind of stuff really easily. And then there's some of us like myself who it doesn't come to as naturally and you have to make a little bit more effort, but make that effort when you're in your 20s, because then it's part of your it's just part of yourself as you get older and start to take care of yourself and your family. And you don't have to get to 45 and discover that you're stuck maybe in a relationship or in a job which you can't lose because, God forbid, you've not made the right financial decisions.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, you're one of the funniest persons, HarperCollins says, So I have to ask you, which is, as a stand-up comic, is there a lot of pressure on you to always be funny? And what's been your biggest disaster?
So you're right. I mean, I think, look, it's kind of like any job. If you're a doctor, you're under pressure to cure everybody. It's like, what? This doctor didn't cure me. Or if you're in finance, you're under pressure to pick all the right stocks all the time. If you're a comedian, you're expected to kill every time you go on stage. I mean, that's an expectation and a fair one from people. And I guess as you build a name for yourself in any particular area, you've apparently built it on the back of your work. So now the expectations are higher. When I was younger and I was fresher to the job, I felt the pressure and I acted on it, you know. So I would go into a party and be like, oh, they're all expecting me to be hilarious. And so I'm going to be. And the moment you plan to be funny, you're definitely going to fall on your face. So for me, falling on my face on stage is fine because that's part of the job. I'm going to try out new material that maybe everyone, you know, a new audience may just not get, or I may get an audience that just isn't geared up for hearing my children jokes or my whatever, my my hairy jokes, like stories about, you know, my body hair, whatever. I may get just a whole bunch of people like just grossed out by it. So that I think is completely okay, and I'm prepared for it, and I need that from time to time so that it keeps you honest. But I think where it's really awkward is when you're at a party and you're like, I have this hilarious story, and never say it's a hilarious story. Let them start laughing first. It's like, I just have a story and tell it and move on, because then if they don't laugh, you're there holding the bag of excrement that is your hilarious story, and it's stinking up the room and no one's laughing and you're dying. And that's happened to me a lot. Now, less so as I've got older and learned also to keep my mouth shut sometimes. Like, it's okay, Raj, you don't have to be the fun. You don't have to be the anything. Just stand in the room and smile.
Thank you, Radhika. I mean, the conversation could go on and on, but now we'll throw the floor open to questions from the audience. The questions can be, the questions to Radhika, to Preeti, to Aparna. I mean, everyone, even to, you know, the founders of Galaxy. There are lots of comments. I mean, I know Preeti made so many valid points, and you too, about financial planning, consistency. That's what even Aparna spoke about. The first question. What does the wonderful quad of founders and co-founders see as success for Galaxy? Would like to take that?
Sonali, that's a question for us. Yes.
Yes, you'd like to take that, please? Yeah.
Yes. So, you know, I would say Galaxy is a journey of bringing women together to support each other. And one of our new members who came on the platform actually made a comment that this is a supportive version of Quora. And that itself for me was, you know, we were so thrilled to hear that, because that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build a Q&A forum, but a supportive one. So I would say there will be many milestones as we go along. I guess we would be very happy to see the impact on people's lives. And when we hear from members that they felt supported, I think that's what we're really working towards.
Okay. Thank you, Sonali. The next question is for Preeti. It's from Kriti.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. Preeti, how do you feel? Have we as consumers of vaccines reacted to COVID vaccines?
Okay. That's like an existentialist question. You know, we have as consumers, I've been watching and listening and talking to consumers for a long time. And I think as far as the vaccine is concerned, we have behaved like all consumers do, which is some have adopted it, you know, instantaneously, some have doubts, some are saying never, and, you know, and so, you know, there's segments of consumers, and that's, you know, marketing 1.0 tells you that there is no one consumer, you have to segment them. So similarly, our reactions to the vaccine have been like that. There are I think it's actually it merits study, because you know, actually call each segment the doubters, the pioneers, or whatever, all of them. They've behaved exactly the way they do when they buy toilet soap, actually.
Okay. The next question is also for you, Preeti. Okay. Why do working women feel guilty? It's something that's visible across different age groups and different jobs. The question is from Sanjana Raj. Yeah. And especially
Why do
working mothers. Why do working women feel guilty? And especially young
not
working.
working mothers or working women?
It says working women,
Okay,
but
okay.
I'm saying it also goes for working mothers.
Actually, I think from what I have seen, it's working women don't feel guilty. It's working mothers who feel guilty. I mean, working women, well, working women, let's say they feel less guilty. Working mothers feel terribly guilty because they think that, the child will somehow grow up to be a monster if they're not at home. I know for a fact that if I had been at home, my daughter would have grown up to be a monster, or I would have killed her. So it's, I think working women feel guilty because the role of running the house, all of that is still very much seen as a woman's responsibility, and that leads to guilt. So unless we can get over that, it's and also I think we have to give ourselves some, some leeway to say that it's okay if your house is not perfectly run or it's, you haven't dusted for 3 days. It's fine. Just tolerate that, because what is your priority? You decide what is your priority and then play by that. It's hard. I mean, it's easy to say, but
Yeah.
it's hard. Yeah.
I think it will help if the men, Indian men especially, start taking more of a responsibility where domestic chores are concerned.
Yeah, but I just want to say something on that.
Yeah.
We can't wait for them to do it because they're not doing it. They've not. It's 2021. They've not done it yet.
Yes,
they've not
they
done
haven't
it yet,
done
and they've not done it yet, man. They're not
Yeah.
going to do it.
Yeah,
Men
yeah.
are never going to help. I'll tell you why. Because they are very happy where they are. They're like pigs in shit. They're happy where they are.
exactly.
They're not going to move. We have to
Actually-
say, like she said, screw it, man. I haven't dusted for a week. It's okay. The kids are alive. Husband's alive.
Yeah.
I'm alive. My job's. I'm happy.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not going to come on board. I'm
Yeah.
telling you that right now.
I agree.
Yeah. Radhika, there's another question for you. I mean, you mentioned about learning improv from the lady in New York. Was she
Yeah.
kind of a mentor for you? What did you think she was a mentor?
That was a good point. Actually, I wanted to ask Preeti more about this, but having a mentor is so critical.
Critical.
Holly became a mentor over time, and she remains one in certain areas. But I also did feel, as your career moves on, you start to look at other people. And in my line, because I got into it so much later, I interestingly have mentors who are also younger than me. So I have mentors who happen to have been writers for longer because they started doing it when they were like 16 and I started doing it when I was 30 plus, So Preeti's point was very, very nicely articulated, as well as like what it is that you look for in a mentor, what are the questions you should be sort of like thinking about. Holly was definitely a mentor for me and a role model more than anything else. I think also I hadn't seen a woman who had so little regard for how she came off in favor of this idea of comedy. That to me was also very important.
Okay. And you're saying you can have multiple mentors and multiple role models, and it needn't just be that one person.
Yeah, I think as life goes along, you might find that to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. The next question is for Aparna. Aparna, how did you make the transition of writing in many ways is still, so the question is that writing in many ways is still just seen as a hobby. How did you make the transition, writing as a profession? Did you have to overcome some barriers for that?
Writing to me was always a profession, Gayatri. It's still, it was always a profession, but yes, it had to, I think the barrier that, the change that I made was that I just stopped taking people too seriously. Earlier, it would, bother me that, people would think that, you write in the night because you like doing it or things like that. My friends and, everyone. But I think after a point, I just stopped taking heed to it. And I found more people of my tribe, I think what Preeti and Radhika both said, I think it's very important to when you say network, it's not just, to build, it's not just to see where you can take advantage of what or how. It is also to build that connection. That is what networking is all about, to build that connection with like-minded people. So I think for me, it was, after a point, I just stopped giving heed to it. If you don't feel it's a profession, I mean, if you feel that it is just a hobby, it's just a hobby.
Yeah, it's how you treat
I
your
would
work.
smile.
Okay. And lots of questions, lots of comments actually on the need for financial planning and whether Galaxy can actually organize a session on mentoring and financial planning. So we promise to come back to you on that. And
There is
It's
one
done.
question I'll just read out from Rachna. This is open to all three of you. Have you ever felt lost in your careers despite having a vision? And if yes, how and what did you do to find your way back?
Okay, so I'll answer this first, Sonali. I think I've been lost always. Every time there, and I do agree with Preeti, the whole imposter syndrome. There's always this ambition to do something, but I think what I would never let go of is the question that, even if you have the vision, I would probably just have a question that how can I reach it? I would never give up hope. Like, for example, after having a child, it was difficult for me, not because I had guilt of leaving the child at home so much, honestly speaking. It's just that I couldn't find a good nanny at that time. It was just practically impossible for me to go. So, I mean, after whatever, I just thought that how is it possible for me to do something which will be creative, which will also give me the growth I want, wherein I can work with flexibility. It doesn't mean that I work lesser. It just means that I'm working more at my own pace. And I think once you have that, once you're open to the fact that, okay, I want this, and let's see how it can come to me, instead of having a very strict view of how it should pan out, things do work out in some ways. And I've been lost all the time. I think I'm lost.
Thank you for sharing that, Aparna. Preeti, Radhika, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I was very lost in the beginning, and I said that till I actually found what I wanted to do. And I share Aparna's, being experience of being lost when I didn't have a nanny. Okay, so it was because then you really feel, is it worth it? I mean, especially when your child is young. You just feel, is this worth it? Am I doing the right thing, etc. So those are the times. Luckily for me, there was always somebody who came to my help. So, but I was less lost after the first 5 years in terms of what I wanted to do. So I think that is something that has really been really a boon.
But I must add here, Preeti, that whenever I've been lost, has also been a time when I have transitioned into a different role.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah.
That is.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add because both of them articulated, I think, pretty much a universal feeling for a lot of us, even though we may look like we know what we're doing, we don't always,
Yes, yeah.
But one thing that my yoga teacher recently told me, and not told me, but she pointed it out in my practice, was that headstands are meant to hurt. Like, stuff is meant to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Every time you do something new, every time you are going through something, like Aparna said, those are the moments when something is going to happen, the big change is going to come. And every time you feel that loss, you start to feel like things are not, it's supposed to feel like that. Don't shy away from it. Don't feel like, oh my God, this is the end, I should stop everything. It's almost like double down and really see where it takes you, and reach out to people, like they've been talking about so much about mentorship and networking and things like that. Share your fears, like say it out loud.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. There are many questions. Okay, there's one from Shelley which says, what is your advice to women who have taken a sabbatical from work to raise children and now would like to step back into a corporate environment? what resources can they leverage that are available online or offline? Open to.
Okay. I think most corporate, let me answer that since I come from the corporate world, which is that most organizations now, especially in their IND efforts, are trying to get women back, women who had to take a break. Women have to take a break not only because of children, but sometimes because they are responsible for taking care of the old people in their, your parent comes or you has to live with you. They take on that responsibility, so they have to stop working. So most organizations have a kind of a return to work plan for women, because there is a shortage of skilled people, and women are a very highly skilled workforce in corporate, especially, things like IT and even in the companies that I work for. So there are conscious programs for that. And I think if you look for the kind of company that you want to work for, I'm pretty sure if it's a good company, it will have a program like that. And now this work from home has actually made it much easier. It's really made it much easier for women to come back to work. Even if they haven't gotten over their child or parents' responsibilities, etc., I think you will find the environment now far more welcoming to women coming back to work.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. There is one question to us. Do the founders have any plans to expand beyond the Indian women audience? So actually, already we are in different countries. I'm in Singapore, Kim is in South Africa, and while we are starting with Indian women, we know that women across the world have very similar challenges. This role identity and how we express ourselves is a challenge across most cultures. So our objective will be to grow from just being, targeting the Indian diaspora to maybe Asian first and maybe the rest of the world. So we do have global ambitions. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah. Should we do the launch now?
Okay, I was just like scrolling through some of the questions. Let me just see.
There was a question from Mamta, question to the panel. What is your advice to women who are seeking mid-career switch, and how can they deal with the apprehensions?
Go ahead, Preeti.
No, I'm a mid-career switch, meaning changing what you're doing.
Yes.
Well, you have to be willing to start at the beginning. I think that's the first requirement. If you're trying to, do something completely different, then you have to put in those years of learning that new profession. You can't expect that you will move laterally in exactly the same way. You may have to sacrifice money, you may have to sacrifice designation, all of that. I think that's the first thing. After that, it's once you've accepted that, then it's a little easier.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I did. I did move into a creative field from being in a corporate environment. And even within this creative field, I find I'm always starting some sort of new, I have a new goal that requires me to sort of achieve a very steep learning curve in a skill set. Like first it was maybe writing columns, then it was writing stand-up comedy material, then now it's become a different type of writing a TV show. So there's always this big gap between where I am and where I want to go. And like she said, I just have to acknowledge that, okay, now I have a mentor who's 35 years, she's 10 years younger than me, and she's giving me advice, and it's okay. And I'm making this much money compared to her that. And that can't be those cannot bother me. The one piece of advice I do have for a lot of people who want to join the arts, though, not any other career, is that please be financially in a secure place. Sit down and make a budget of how much you're going to spend per month. Make sure you've got 12 to 18 months of that money saved. or you have a very rich husband or father or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it is that you have. Because nothing stops creativity like having no money. That is like the first, you will wake up panicking every day and you will go to sleep panicking and you will get nothing done. So it's an important thing.
Yeah, thank you for making that point, Radhika. Very, very important. Transitions and being willing to start from the first step, right? There are many questions and we would love to take them all, but I think we are, nearing the end of our time here, and we welcome all of you to come on to the Galaxy platform and ask. And hopefully Aparna and Preeti are already there. Maybe Radhika will join us. Yeah, so it would be lovely to, continue this conversation on the platform. So Gayatri, over to you.
Yeah, now it's time for the launch video. Let's now formally launch Galaxy. Ask Bindas, share Dil Se.
Okay, we
So
have
now, would you do the honors? We have a video to announce.
We have a short video which we wanted to just share with all of you. So thank you. That was our short video. We have the Android app already available. You can see the QR code on our background, so you can just scan and download. Our iPhone app will be ready in a day or two. We were hoping it would be ready, but something always happens, right? So look forward to, Okay, so
time for a toast.
Time for a toast, okay.
Announcing the birth of Galaxy.
Yes.
Hope this squad of sister grows within the country and across the world, and hope we all learn to thrive and support each other.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. Okay, let me start my list of thank yous. First of all, thank you to all the three speakers, Preeti, Radhika and Aparna. Thank you for taking out time on a Sunday evening to be with us. Really appreciate your time. And thank you to the audience. I think at the peak we had 96 people, now down to 70. But thank you for being here and listening and sharing all your thoughts on the comments and asking some very tough questions to our speakers. And I would like to thank the team Galaxy for creating all this buzz around the launch. We really enjoyed. I think we all had fun. So thank you, Sonali Panda, who's our chief cheerleader, the key hustler, the chief hustler.
I really enjoyed it.
Kim for all the social media work. Gayatri is our talk show host, and that's why takes charge of that. So thank you to the team. I want to mention here that the name Galaxy was coined by one of our classmates from XLRI, Ananta. He coined this name 5 years back. We finally decided to launch, but it's about world of women, Galaxy and she. So I want to thank Ananta for coming up with a name that really resonated with us. And thanks to all our family members. Many of our family members are also here to support. So thank you so much for, supporting us through all these crazy days. And so excited that we're finally launching, and would love to see you all on the platform.
Great. Can I have the one last word, Sonali?
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry. There were so many, so many insights we've got today, and I thought maybe we could just quickly go through some of them. Preeti said, let's get out of the imposter syndrome. Get yourself a mentor. Creativity has to be backed with consistency. Women should not look down at networking. Women need a sisterhood, a club, someone to champion them. You must have a diversity of experience. Hone your people skills and your communication skills. Do financial planning, get financially secure. If you're passionate, if you enjoy what you do, you'll become less risk averse. So thank you, ladies, Preeti, Radhika, Aparna, and all the audience. Thank you, ladies, for your modesty, honesty, time, thoughts, sharing your fears. Thank you. We've just started this journey with Galaxy, and we really hope it helps and empowers many other women as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. I think I learned a lot from the other panelists as well. So we should do this more often.
We intend to maybe once a month at least. We intend to get people together. So yeah, it's lovely. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You don't have to leave right away. If you want to, for the after party, hang around.
Okay. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Going to